Underwriters of the Arizona Mining Review include Mining Foundation of the Southwest, a nonprofit organization based in Tucson, Arizona, working to educate the public about mineral resources in the mineral extraction and processing industries. Amigos, Southwest Buyer's Guide. For almost 40 years, Amigos has worked to provide a better business environment for mining. Pioneer Equipment Incorporated, serving the equipment needs of the mining industry since 1959. And Copper State Bolt and Nut Company, in business since 1972, with 21 branches to serve you.
This is the Arizona Mining Review for June 24th, 2015. I'm your host, Lee Allison, at the Arizona Geological Survey here in Tucson. And joining us from Phoenix, as he does every month, is Nyal Niemuth, the head of our Economic Geology program. Nyal, welcome back. And understand it's running pretty hot up in Phoenix this week, but you've got some hot news in the mining industry as well.
Yeah, it's been pretty hot, yeah. But I don't know if the news will measure up to the heat.
Fair enough. Well, there's a new report out on the Northern Vertex mine, isn't there?
Yeah, Northern Vertex was required to produce a bankable feasibility study as part of their joint venture with Patriot Gold. And they've released some of the summarizing results. The actual report's not available on Cedar yet. But there's some interesting tidbits in there.
You want to share a couple of them with us?
Yeah, a couple that I think we'll find interesting are the forecasted employment. Mojave County's been hit with a couple of closures in the last 6 months. And so they're forecasting here that they might have 83 employees, including the contractor. Okay. And the economics are looking pretty favorable, such that they're excited. They think this will indeed let them either do an equity or some banking financing of the project.
Well, Niall, what would be the life of the mine and kind of production over that period based on this new analysis?
The study was looking at a 5-year mine life, although there'd be another period, probably another 9 months to a year of leaching because of the lag in recovery. Mm-hmm. And what they were looking at was a $33 million capital cost that would put together a mine that was expected to see about 200,000 ounces of gold production, about 2 million ounces of silver recovery, and that would mine 7 million tons. The interesting note on the mining plant compared to what some of the permitting concerns were before, the study looked at just having the mining operation still only beyond the patented claims.
Oh. And what was the outcome of that?
Well, I mean, what that would do, since they can conduct this entirely on their private land, that keeps them from having to do the NEPA study on the federal lands, which would be a delay and a cost.
Okay, so it would allow them to get out under operation much more quickly and a much lower cost.
That's correct.
Right. Okay. Well,
so we'll see if they can indeed go out and raise some of this money. $33 million is not going to be an easy thing.
Not in this
current climate.
Yeah. Right. Okay. Well, now we're getting a little bit short on time. Wildcat Silver changed its name. New name. What was behind that?
Yeah, the reason was kind of interesting. They're going to go to AZ Mining Inc., Arizona Mining Inc. I think dropping the silver probably reflects that some of their drilling they announced in May showed that as they go into some of the carbonate replacements, they're seeing more base metals, particularly zinc. They reported a number of intercepts of several percent zinc along with a few percent lead. Well, still along with some reasonable silver numbers.
Okay, so moving from primarily silver to a much more diversified array of minerals.
Yeah, more base and precious metals.
Okay, great. Well, seems like you had one other item I think you were giving me a heads up on.
We might just mention, as we have been the last couple of months, we keep monitoring that copper price. And this month, we had a dip of about 20 cents a pound. And the bad correlation was we're seeing that more normal relationship to the growth in inventories at the warehouse stockpiles or warehouse stocks.
Okay, so right now the 12-month price for copper has been now something below $3 on average?
Yeah, we've seen that the average drop just below $3.
Yeah.
So not a good trend. Let's hope we can reverse that.
That's going to be a big economic impact in Arizona and with some of the companies based here that mine copper worldwide.
Indeed, it will.
Yeah. Okay. Well, now we've got to move on to our next guest. Thanks for joining us again today. We'll see you next month on Arizona Mining Review.
Looking forward to it. Maybe it'll be hotter than this month.
With a little monsoon rain, we hope.
Yes.
Okay. Great. Thanks.
You're welcome.
Well, joining us now is Dr. John Spencer, the Chief Geologist here at the Arizona Geologic Survey. And John's just completed a new report released here at the survey, partial database for breccia pipes and collapse features on the Colorado Plateau, Northwestern Arizona. John, welcome back to the program.
Thank you.
So tell me, what's the takeaway message from this new publication?
Okay, first I want to be sure to point out I have two co-authors on here. Karen Wenrick, who is a uranium specialist, formerly with the U.S. Geological Survey, and I wouldn't advertise myself as a uranium geologist, but she is legitimately.
Right.
And then Trevor Cole, who's the third author on here. He was a volunteer at the Arizona Survey and did a lot of work for us for free.
Okay. Now, Karen, when she was at the USGS, she was a co-author on the 1989 study.
That's right.
That showed breccia pipe distribution across northern Arizona.
That's right. The first map, then the only region-wide map of breccia pipes in Arizona was produced by her and Hoyt Sutphin, the two of them, Sutphin and Wenrick, 1989.
And that's been the definitive reference that everyone uses to assess how many breccia pipes we think there are across that region.
That's right.
And they came up with 1,294 breccia pipes.
Yeah, that's about right.
Okay, but now you and Karen, with Travis's help, have gone back and you've been looking at some of those areas in more detail.
That's right. What we did here, first of all, Trevor Cole is a volunteer, georeferenced about, perhaps a dozen new USGS maps that Karen didn't have access to, and then went around and spotted all the features that looked like breccia, that were shown as collapse features or breccia pipes on those maps.
Okay.
And build up a table of about 1,000 features that he identified. So that's one of the three sets of data that Trevor produced from USGS maps.
From these are additional USGS maps.
They're newer
since the
since
the 1989 report came out.
That's right.
Okay, so 1,000 additional collapse features which you think are likely breccia pipes.
That's right. Now, because the 89-550 report, the OFR 89-550 that Sutphin and Wenrick produced in 1989, it was made on a base map of USGS 1x2 degree sheet topographic maps that was cut and taped together with Scotch tape. And then the dots on it were big, the big stick-on dots.
Right.
And so the accuracy of the locations of those features is they're probably good within a kilometer, whereas the newer USGS maps that Trevor was digitizing have much higher accuracy, but we can't actually know for sure with many of them whether the same pipe is represented in the two different map sets, and Trevor didn't have enough time to go back and try to figure out whether they corresponded one-to-one. So the sum of the two data sets is not the number of pipes, because there are many duplicates within, but we never figured out which ones were duplicates.
Okay. Now, when I look at you've got a big map that goes with this, but when I go through the inset map, there's two areas in particular here, it looks like, where you've gone in.
That's right.
So
yeah, I would show this map if you can, but it's one of the pages in the report. And it shows a really high cluster of breccia pipe concentrations. And there's a third data set in here that Karen Wenrick produced by just going over these areas as carefully as she possibly could, both on aerial photographs and field checking. And she came up with a much higher density of possible breccia pipe features on the plateau. And my guess is that if people went over the whole area with similar detail, they'd come up with a huge number of what I would call candidate breccia pipes. They're features that might or might not be breccia pipes.
Okay, so when I look at these two study areas you've done, these concentrated areas, the concentration of pipes in here, or collapse features I should say, looks to be at least 10 times higher than the
Right.
concentration outside these
Right.
areas.
Right, well, it's not meant to imply that those are areas with exceptionally high potential pipe concentrations.
So
They're just areas that have received very careful scrutiny.
Right, so that was the point I was going to ask you. Since you've done two different areas, you've gone in and done detailed studies, it looks like there's at least 10 times, maybe 50 times concentration of these features in those. If you then extrapolate and say, look, we've got pipes across the whole region at this kind of lower density, when we go in and study this, we might expect to see the same level of density across this whole region. Is that a reasonable extrapolation?
That is a reasonable extrapolation. Yes.
Okay. So then you might argue that there's 10 times or more number of pipes out here than the 1989 report would indicate.
That's right. It's possible. Now, let me add that these Breccia pipes they're pipe-like features that extend for perhaps 500 to 2,000 feet in vertical extent.
Mm-hmm.
And they've piped upwards from a Breccia zone in the Devonian, in the red wall limestone,
Okay.
Mississippian red wall limestone. And they've pretty much figured out that in many of these pipes, they may not actually reach the surface. And so there could be Breccia pipe deposits that have no surface representation at all, the so-called blind deposits. And so I think that the take-home message from that is that the plateau area with this uranium mineralization is so complicated in the subsurface, and it would be so difficult to find many of these small high-grade uranium deposits, that it's likely that for many, many decades we won't really know how much uranium is down there.
Right.
It's honeycomb, Swiss cheese-like, and they're very hard to find. There's a geophysical technique that may be able to locate the larger ones right now, but until we do a lot more drilling and a lot more exploration, we're really not going to know whether this uranium resource is potentially a world-class resource.
Mm-hmm. Well, we've kind of jumped ahead here for our viewers who haven't really been following this. We've been talking about collapse features and Breccia pipes, and now all of a sudden we're talking uranium.
Right.
So what you're pointing out is that the red wall limestone, there's been collapse features in there, and then the rock has collapsed above those caverns or cavities,
Right.
creating these pipes of brecciated rock,
That's
collapsing in, reaching near or sometimes to the surface, or in many cases to the surface. They generally are less than 300 feet in diameter, I think is typical. And then as the groundwaters have moved through them, they've carrying uranium and other metals, other minerals, as they've gone through the Hermit Shale and the Supai Formation, a lot of those metals have been precipitated out. So we have concentrations of uranium and copper and other things, particularly in the Hermit and the Supai.
Right.
And so people have been going in and mining down into these depressions, down these pipes, down a few hundred feet to 1,000 feet or more, and finding these high grade uranium deposits.
Right.
So the fact that there may be at least 10 times as many features out here suggests that we might have 10 times as much uranium out here as we've been thinking for the past couple of decades.
Right.
Okay.
Yeah.
Yeah, and that's a lot of uranium. It's already been considered one of the highest grade and largest amount of uranium deposits in the country.
That's right.
And if you have 10 times or 20 times that, this, as you say, becomes a world-class resource.
I should also point out here that the uranium deposits, the uraninite, can be dated by uranium-lead isotope dating, and it's not a good geochronometer because it's leaky. The lead leaks out, that sort of thing. It's not, the mineral uraninite doesn't really hold the lead very well. But what they've found is that they're roughly about 200 to 260 million years old. And the pipes themselves do not extend upward above the Triassic sediments. So they get up into the Chinle and then stop. And so that means all the collapse, apparently, in the uranium mineralization is Chinle age or older. Now the significance of that is that in areas in Arizona that are covered by Jurassic rocks, which includes a lot of the plateau,
Right.
there may be uranium deposits in breccia pipes down there, but we can't see them at the surface.
Right.
So they're completely blind.
Right, and so we're seeing these because this part of the plateau has been eroded off down to this level. If you go further to the east, you've got younger sediments stacked up there, and nobody's seen these. You're going to have to drill through a lot to find them.
That's right.
Right. Okay.
If you can figure out where to drill.
If you can figure out where to drill. Now, one thing you mentioned is that some of the exploration companies have been testing out new geophysical techniques, and we've heard some reports, anecdotal, informal, that the companies have been finding geophysical signatures of breccia pipes where there's been no evidence on the surface. And a couple of them have been drilled, and people have been able to confirm, yes, that is a breccia pipe with that signature. And I understand in a couple cases there's been reports of the high-grade mineralization being present, so that the geophysical evidence would suggest that there's even more of these features out here with no surface expression. And all of the ones you've and your partners have developed here have a surface expression.
Right.
Right. Okay. John, the timing of this is really important because I think as you and I both realize, there's a proposal to create a large national monument across this region, the Grand Canyon Watershed National Monument. And one of the reasons for doing it is to try to prevent mining in the region, particularly the uranium mining. So this kind of information could have a big impact on that discussion. Some people might argue this is a world-class uranium resource. We need to go out and develop it for national security, for economic development. Alternatively, people may look at this and say, there's 10 times as much potential to cause damage out there, so this is even more reason to lock this up into a monument.
Right.
So, but our job is to get the best evidence, information out to help people make informed decisions.
That's right.
So that's where we're going with this report. Okay. Anything else you wanted to add to this?
Well, I would add that we have an earlier open file report that addresses some of the environmental issues
Right.
associated with mining this type of deposit. And they're really fairly benign in terms of mining. They don't leave a big open pit. You know, they're done underground. The site can be remediated, and basically, except for some vegetation disturbance, you'd never know that a mine had been at these places. And I've seen some. I've seen at least
Right.
one of these up north of the Grand Canyon, and they're, you know, basically two mine shafts. Pull out the uranium from 1,000 or 2,000 feet down. Dump the waste back down a mine shaft, regrade the ground, and you're done. And there's very little environmental disturbance. Now, the other aspect of it is of course, that the ore itself is not. You wouldn't want it in your front yard, but it's not really a problem in terms of contamination of the Colorado River. The Colorado River naturally carries 40 to 60 tons of uranium a year.
Per year.
And so if a few pounds or even a lot more got added, you couldn't even detect it because of the large amount of natural background uranium in the river. So we have an earlier open file report that goes through these issues.
Right.
If anybody's really concerned about environmental issues, they should take a look at that report. I don't have the number with me off the top
Oh,
of my
we'll
head.
we'll
It's
try to
actually
get it up on the
it's
screen
it's
here.
cited in here.
Oh, good.
It's cited in the report. So
Right.
if you're interested.
And this report will be publicly available on the AZGS website for free viewing and downloading. It's Digital Information DI 42, Arizona Geological Survey, so we'll make sure the link is posted on the screen as well.
I should emphasize that the report it's a brief report. The intention is that it accompanies the databases. This is a way to release these databases that we have in case they're useful for whatever reason.
Right.
There they are.
Okay, great. John, exciting report. Thank you very much. Good to have you back on the show.
All right. Thanks, Lee.
Okay. We're here at the High Country Conference Center in Flagstaff, Arizona, where the State Geologist annual meeting is just wrapped up. And with me is George Love, who's the former director of the Pennsylvania Geologic Survey and chaired a session today on mineral resources. And George, before the Geologic Survey of Pennsylvania, you were in the mining industry.
Yes, I was, Lee. I spent about 30 years in the mining industry. Early on in my career, exploration for gold, silver, anything you could make money at. And then ultimately in phosphates in Florida, I ran mines there and finished my career my mining career in limestones in the northern part of the U.S.
The group asked you to moderate this session. It brought together state geologists, U.S. Geological Survey folks, and people from other federal agencies, the private sector, and others. So you gave a report today on what came out of that session about mineral resources, policy, and directions and programs in the country. Can you give us a summary of what came out of it?
Sure. Lee, it is without question that our society is built upon the value, or rather the minerals that we utilize. People have cell phones today, they have color TVs, they've got a little bit of everything, including some of the windmills, the wind generators that are supposed to be so good for the environment. They require quite a few minerals that the mining community does. So effectively, in our session, we had a number of folks from the USGS that were talking about, number one, how does the USGS and the geologic community in general, how do we present information to the public so they can understand how important these minerals are and how important they are to the everyday life of the folks in this country and throughout the world. One of the issues that is important is people have a tendency to think that everything is immediately available, or we can recycle everything, and recycling is a wonderful thing. But the fact of the matter is the population of the world is increasing, so there will be an ever-increasing demand for mineral commodities. So within that regard, the USGS is looking towards trying to make forecasts into the future of two important things. One being, what are those critical minerals that we will need going forward? Because that will change with technology and as different things are developed. And the other thing is that until that development is made, how do we evaluate the availability of the minerals that we need today? What are the forecasting mechanisms that will allow us to see the distribution of these important minerals? As you know, there has been a lot of conversation about the value of rare earths and how important they are. Now, while the term rare earth may not be completely accurate, they're not all that rare, but in mineable and recoverable quantities, the Chinese have had a pretty good grip on that. So forecasting the availability of those commodities and what it's going to look like in terms of cost, those are very important things. And if I can say that Senator Murkowski from Alaska has proposed a bill that would that the president would direct the U.S. Geological Survey and others to look at creating those forecasts. And I personally think that that is a very important thing for us to do. Our economy is built upon mineral commodities, and we need to be looking forward to what's going on, what are these costs going to be, and what is their availability, so that we can rationally think about these.
And one important component of that bill, which is Senate Bill 883 in the Senate, is that it makes it a federal-state partnership, brings the state geological surveys in, and directs the Interior Secretary and others to work with state geological surveys and draw on our expertise and local knowledge. So it's one that we're following very closely.
Oh yes, and I would imagine all of the state surveys should be doing this,
right,
because the state surveys do have more information on the ground that is critical to the well-being of not only their state, but to the United States in general. So that partnership is extremely important. And I personally, I will say that I see more and more of that partnership and the camaraderie developing between those agencies and the state surveys. And I think that's a wonderful thing.
One of the things we discussed, we had a lot of senior folks from the USGS here in their mineral resources program. And they put out an annual summary of mineral resources across the country. Most of that data comes from the state geological surveys, or in some cases our partners in the state. And they compile that and publish it. But often it takes 3, 4, 5 years in some cases to get that out. So one of the things we talked about was a way of expediting that, possibly having the states put out their state information earlier, and then eventually there will be the national report coming out to try to get the most current information out and shared with the public, with decision makers, so we really understand the situation.
Right. In any commodity these days, and minerals are no different, timeliness is very important. It's easy to look back 5 years and say, I wish I had known that. But to be able to look forward, to anticipate shortages and problems that may come up, that's what a timely report will help us to avoid.
I was interested in your recognition that even if we recycled everything, we've got an expanding demand. And there was an article in the journal Nature about a year and a half ago that looked at the demand for mineral resources for renewable energy. You mentioned windmills, but solar has the same thing. Concrete for base, the metals, the silicon for the photovoltaic panels. And they did some estimates that if we were to meet global targets for renewable energy, we would have to produce more minerals in the next 30 years than we've done since the dawn of civilization. It's just incredible. So on that basis, if we took all of the metals that have been produced since civilization began and recycled them, we wouldn't be able to meet the demands just for renewable energy support, let alone the growing population.
All the other things. People with Game Boys and all those other things would be sorely pressed for those resources. But yes, you're right. There was an example that was given that I think probably would hit a little more close to home. When you look at the Chinese production or use of concrete in the last 3 years, I believe it was, it is greater than the entire history of the use of concrete as we know it. And it's just incredible to think about the rate at which we're consuming these minerals. And we need to keep going forward if we want to maintain our standards. So it's a critical component.
Yeah. Well, Dr. Suzette Kimball, who's the acting director of the USGS, was here earlier in the meeting and laid out a number of areas where the USGS and the state surveys can work more effectively together, and laid out a kind of a challenge to us about how do we build those programs. And I think mineral resources is one of the key areas where we need to figure out how we can work better.
Absolutely. And I certainly applaud her efforts, because those are the things that need to be done. Not only is it good for us in the profession to realize that we have this working relationship, but it needs to be extended to the public in general, because they need to understand that their governments, both at the local level, where they can have a little closer touch with each of us, as you have mentioned, people come into your office and ask questions on the local basis, but all of us need to work together, and Dr. Kimball is certainly trying to set a wonderful standard going forward.
George, thank you so much for taking a few minutes with us. We're glad you were able to join us here at Flagstaff.
Thank you. It is a privilege, and I must tell you that you have a wonderful state.
Yes.
I enjoyed every bit of spending time here. My wife did as well. Thank you for having us.
Well, I know you've taken an early retirement here, but if you want to get back into the mineral exploration business, there are some great targets, and we'd like to have you come back and put your skills to work here. So.
Actually, this is my third retirement.
Okay.
And I think I'm going to get it right this time.
Okay, great. Thanks so much.
Thank you, Lee. It was my pleasure.